Elsewhere in the news, I thought it was worth pointing out, this kind of merged together two sort of things that have kind of been in the news recently, where the top headline is that Santa Ragione says Apple is delisting Wheels of Aurelia, quote, without justification. This comes from game developer. Horses and Saturnalia. Did you play Saturnalia? I feel like someone talked about that game on here at one point. Maybe if it was going to be any, it was going to be you. I don't know. Developer of Horses and Saturnalia this is quoting game developer, have accused Apple of undermining the, quote, value and sustainability of games as cultural and artistic products after the tech company informed the studio its 2016 visual novel, Wheels of Aurelia, will be pulled from the App Store without clear justification. The studio's co-founder and director shared the news with game developer and explained Wheels of Aurelia will be removed from the App Store on July 25th. It was apparently granted an extended grace period after Santa Ragione appealed the decision, even though these appeals were ultimately denied. This quote from the studio's co-founder, we firmly believe that removing fully functional artistic work simply due to infrequent updates undermines the value and sustainability of games as cultural and artistic products. Like books, films, and music albums, video games represent complete creative works that do not inherently require continual updates beyond maintaining basic functionality. On the App Store, Apple does have requirements where if a new phone comes out with a different form factor or resolution, you are required to update and support that in order to stay on the App Store. They also, I was not aware of this until this story, have sort of a note in their developer rules, which is basically, even if you are technically compliant, if you are kind of like abandonware, which is like nobody's downloading it and you've just been on the App Store for 7-8 years, as this game is, you can like be culled into a list to be delisted. So even though you are up to date technically and the game will run on new devices and new operating systems, Apple reserves the right to basically say, we're going to remove you from the App Store. And importantly, this is not a distinction that they apply to other art forms, right? Like there is no world where they're going to remove a book or a movie because it's not being downloaded a lot. And so if the developer is keeping up with the technical constraints or requirements, like just because it's old seems to be something that Apple is raising as a reason to remove it from the App Store. And so I bring this up because the other thing that's been in the news recently is an ongoing movement called Stop Killing Games, which is where people have filed a petition that has now amassed 1 million signatures, which means that it can be submitted to the EU for verification. And I'm quoting here from Eurogamer. It can be submitted to the EU for verification and then potentially either progress to a public hearing or full debate session at the European Parliament. And what Stop Killing Games is trying to do is address an ongoing tension in a lot of video games with online services, which is that when it ceases making money or the publisher ceases an interest in the game, they say, well, we're not just turning off the servers. We may be like turning off the game entirely. Or even when they turn off the servers, there's nothing built in. We're like, we're releasing the tools so that if the audience would like to continue doing this on their own, they can. And so I thought these two stories came together sort of neatly to speak towards the sort of lack of respect for like history and sustainability in video games, and where these companies that get people interested in buying and playing their games and build communities then have very arbitrary reasons for kind of ending that. So I found both of these to sort of like in one measure, it's a little bit of hope for like building in clauses or requirements for developers to find ways for communities to keep games alive after the sort of like the online functionality ends. And then in Apple's case, it just seems like just really disrespectful to the medium of and the art form of video games to have such arbitrary reasons for delisting a game like this. And it's not the first instance that it's happened, but this one really kind of struck a nerve with me, and I think a lot of other people, just because of how blatantly disrespectful it seems. What about the two? Anything about this strikes you as potentially interesting about, I don't know, this current moment and how we treat video games and sort of their place in history?
Yeah, I really like Wheels of Aurelia. I played this game, I think,
you set it up? Like I'd heard of it, but I was not familiar with the game personally.
You totally should play this. I remember loving it. I think I might have played it on I want to say Switch, but part of me is like, is it on Switch? There's on Switch. It's a visual novel driving game. So
it is
I
on
forget
Switch.
if you
It is 100% on
okay,
Switch.
that is where I played it. I forget if you can control like the car or not. Like if you can, it's more of just like a thing to do. The main mechanic of the game is making decisions, but you're driving, and it honestly has a lot of like the same DNA as Keep Driving, a game that I feverishly back for this year. That I think is fantastic. Where you're, I forget if it's like always the same like hitchhikers you pick up, or if it's different, but like someone gets in your car, and I believe, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to say like what it is because I don't remember if it's a reveal, but it's a fun game that is looking at both like the political landscape, but also like the social interactions like between people. It takes place in 70s Italy. It tells, so I'm just kind of reading from the Steam. It tells the story of Layla, a restless woman driving on the road of Western Italy, and there's like, things occur. So it's very much like these like nice
endings. Oh, this seems neat.
Yeah, it's these really cool like conversations and dramatic events that occur on the road, and I think this game is phenomenal. I love this game. So with Wheels of Aurelia, I was like, a long drag of cigarette. I haven't heard that name in years, but I played this with my brother. If you're a narrative game fan, you definitely should be playing this. Again, I played on Switch. I'm seeing on Steam like the reviews are made. I don't know if that's like a performance issue. So again, Switch works great there. And maybe you can download it now for a little bit until you can't. But yeah, I mean, I think
it's only delisted on the App Store. Like it will continue to exist.
Well, I mean, on your phone, kind of element of it. Hearing that's definitely a bummer. I think too. Speaking specifically to the Apple angle of like these two stories, it is a really bad look and really unfortunate for Apple to, I think, have this position when they are also like, they have Apple Arcade and they like, use games to, help sell not just like their subscription service, but also like their larger one, which is like Apple One, that kind of gives you like the Apple subscription ecosystem. I think it's just, besides the fact that it's bad for players and the developers making the games, I think it's a bad look for someone trying to like enter the space. I think it makes you look like what you ultimately are, but you like don't really want to lead with that, which is like you're here to make money and you don't really like maybe care about like the artistic angle of games, which is true for probably many, many companies that are in the game publishing business, the game marketing business. Like, I don't believe that everyone is here for the love of the art, but I don't want to feel that when I'm at your product in your ecosystem. And I think increasingly Apple is like really starting to feel that way, especially, we've talked on this show about how as cool as it is to have like sort of definitive versions of games and things on Apple Arcade, like they definitely have leaned more into what's hot, what works, what's already popular, and less into the, new thing, up and coming, taking a chance on stuff. Again, not exclusively, but they have like leaned a little bit more that way. And I think this feeds into that narrative that they themselves are kind of creating, which is like, we don't like really care that deep about these things, which I think is unfortunate because I think it's there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't think we've gone as crazy as like back in the day. We were sort of talking about will the iPhone kill like the console? I think the answer is no, right? But it's still a really cool place to play, and it has a lot of different like options for people. And obviously is great in terms of pushing back against the monetization that often does run pretty rampant in like the mobile game space, and kind of providing a place for players to have solace from that. So yeah, I think this is definitely like a misstep on Apple's part, especially as they become increasingly a player in like the video game space.
I mean, Apple as a company fundamentally does not respect video games. That actually, I think, goes all the way back to like, I think this is a generational issue with Apple, in that Steve Jobs also did not respect or care for video games, yet positions Apple as a art first company that like deeply respects movies, books, music. Like so much of, I think what Apple, like, what was the famous like Jobs quote, like, we're at the intersection of like liberal arts and technology. And like part of what is in that pitch is like, well, technology can service art and creativity and unlock help you unlock your potential to make things, and then creates platforms like iTunes, like to try and address people want to play music. Like we'll make a great player for it and a platform where people can hopefully make money during an era of the music business in which things like Napster and others were sort of like eating a lot of the music industry alive. And so Apple is a company that publicly likes to say, like, we love creatives. They make tools. They make tools for, Final Cut Pro is a video editing tool. Like they make tools. Lightroom was like a really excellent like photo tool. I don't know if all of these still exist in their various forms, but like they've made applications for pros. They position themselves publicly as champions of creatives. But the one place where that is not true is video games. Apple just does, and I use the word disrespect because it's the only way that you can actually look at the evidence in front of you, which is they make so much money off of the App Store. And what is the underlying revenue of the App Store is microtransactions and reoccurring purchases that are predominantly through video games. Now, these are lots of video games that most of us don't play, right? Like these are the Candy Crushes of the world, but they are like the Genshin Impacts of the world. Like there are like spaces where that crosses over, but they make an enormous amount of money out of video games. They also love to leverage the popularity of video games to make them seem like they care about video games. Like they most recently with like new like chipsets, they announced like, hey, Assassin's Creed and Resident Evil or Cyberpunk is actually, I think, launching this week on for like Apple Silicon Macs, and like, hey, no, like we care about games. Like, well, no, you'll leverage the popularity of games in the culture to make it seem like you understand games. You'll take the money of people who play games because you know that it's popular on your platforms, but you actually fundamentally do not understand. And stuff like this shows a complete disrespect for like the art form and medium of video games. Because if that was core to what you cared about as a company, you would find, some compatibility layer or some other way of like, hey, warning, this is a video game that came out in 2016. The developers like have not updated it in the last 4 years. Please be advised that if you install this, it may not function properly. But if it doesn't, please ask for a refund. And that seems like a very reasonable way to address the sort of like the fact that video games are tied to technology in a way that other art forms frequently aren't, or at least can scale with the advance of technology in ways that games often have to be like recoded or updated in order to like stick around on a device that is getting updated or a new device. And there's just nothing that here. It is just cold, calculated. Hey, we liked it when we were making money off your game when it was relevant. You know what? I think you should just actually leave the store now that is no longer the case. And that's why I think the term disrespect is like applicable, because otherwise you would find some way to champion like the game and the art form. And instead, well, you're not making money for us anymore, so please kindly get the fuck out. And that sucks. And I feel like that sentiment is part of what funds also the Stop Killing Games movement, which like just wants developers and more publishers really to be mindful of the fact that like when you build something that makes the promise, hey, if you like this, you'll be able to play this in theory forever. But in reality, it's forever until it stops making money. And if as part of your development process, you build in tools and resources for the community to take over after the fact, or as some games do, where they do sort of end of life updates, where it's like, hey, the online services are turning off, but the game will be playable in a different form. I think those are very reasonable asks to make of people who like buy your game. And so I hope pressure like this, whether it results in every game having to incorporate things like that, I don't know. But I think those are reasonable asks on the part of the folks putting together the petition. So elsewhere, or Kyle, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to say, it feels like unfortunate sort of place to be where we don't have enough people doing archival work in the industry, and like the companies themselves are often not going to take that on for them on themselves, especially as we get further and further into an era where like large swaths of games exist in the cloud, right? Like Destiny 1 is only still playable because the Destiny 1 servers are still on and Bungie is still maintaining them, but someday, like,
For now.
when those shut down, like, the game disappears, because so much of that game does not exist on the disk. It's like, you need, because of the way that they, the architecture of the game works, you need a server somewhere to serve you that stuff. And I'm sure people smarter than me could probably, talk about how there may or may not be ways to make it a single disc experience, like workarounds that you could do. But for the most part, it definitely feels like the second that these companies are like, well, the money no longer makes a sense, like the servers are going down and the game doesn't exist because nobody cares about having an archive in games. And the people who do are probably usually woefully under resourced to do the sort of work that this specific type of thing.
They don't even exist in an official capacity, and like they're not, like even the work that is being done is done like out of passion.
Yes,
and out of
just
the games community, but that doesn't involve like the major publishers. I mean, even the ESA, who is essentially the sort of a lobbyist firm for a bunch of major video game publishers. They run the ESRB. Like they have multiple times argued against, like in government, like when there have been moves made to have essentially librarians and historians access commercially unavailable games through physical collections, like at the U.S. Library of Congress. Like historians should be able to like log in and remotely play a game that exists physically and then is now like could be played remotely through a system. And the ESA, representing like an enormous amount of video game industry, said no, like that, that would, we love preservation, but like not like that, because ultimately systems like that undermine the ability for game companies to resell you like things in different forms. And so preservation is actually, from their perspective, like anti-commercial, like it's anti-commercial, because it represents a way to play something as it is, as opposed to finding a new way to sell you. I mean, even, the Nintendo Online like is a pretty decent service these days. But you know what it's way worse than? Wii Virtual Console, which like had an enormous library of games that, you know what you did? You purchased them. Like, yes, okay, we'll get it's a license, yada, yada, yada. But like, let's, for the purposes of like this distinction, you got to buy it. It was on your Wii, and you could buy an enormous library of classic video games that ran really well. And with the Switch, they said, what's better? What if you couldn't own any of those and you have to pay a reoccurring subscription fee to get access to A, a much more limited library, and B, you are at the whims of Nintendo maintaining that library and the licenses that allow them to put it there. And all of that feeds into this general anxiety, which I think is very much deserved, over just the ability to play games and play them how you want and appreciate gaming history in a way that the video game industry itself seems often against in even the most reasonable terms.
Yeah. I think at the very least, for like the 8-bit, 16-bit, those eras in general, so much of that work has been done accidentally by, or not accidentally, but like by emulation like communities, where it's just like after a certain point it was like, well, we want to keep these things alive as well, versus just like, yeah, we could play them for free because they're so small at this point and like computers can run them. And it's like a little bit like the Nintendo Switch Online thing becomes less about like access to those things and more like, well, I need it to be able to play online functionality stuff, and the extra stuff on top, I think, as a convenience thing, sometimes I'll open it up. But for the most part, like, access for like those older games is luckily, like, is actually like better than after the like N64 era, things start to drop off, just because like it was a little harder to like start emulating those things, so it can be kind of tough after that point. But are they like keeping that sort of stuff like archived somewhere? Maybe. I don't know. Nintendo is the one I feel like that could maybe have secret like vaults of data that they would keep, right? Like,
well, I mean, historically, like this happens every time there's a re-release of right. older games. Like,
it's like, oh yeah,
Japan, like the Japanese game developers, like historically in that era, did a poor job of like maintaining and like archiving source code, which often makes like even just like good faith efforts, like repackagings of like collections of games, sometimes a difficult endeavor, as they have to sort of reverse engineer all that work because it is right. just not, it wasn't maintained in a zip file and put on a floppy disk somewhere.